Good morning, afternoon, or evening, everyone. My name is Jeremy Walsh, and I'm the Director of Support, Training, and Documentation for BNI Connect. I'd like to welcome everybody to the webinar today. Today's webinar is the first in a series of 4 webinars that are specifically for leadership teams or people on some type of a leadership position in the chapter. What we're going to be going over the next couple of days is going to be some of the various leadership team tools and functions in BNI Connect. Today, we're going to concentrate on most of the everyday tasks and reports that are available to leadership team members. So we're going to talk about, how to enter POMS reports and how to schedule a speaker in the system and how to use the visitor entry in BNI Connect. We're also going to look at a number of the statistical reports and maybe some ways that you can use those to find more information about things in your chapter or use them as tools. This is part of a series, though, so we are going to be talking about some other things over the next couple of days as well. For example, tomorrow, we're going to be talking about the goals program for chapters and how you can enter your goals in BNI Connect and how we can follow along with them. Then next week, on December 14th, next Wednesday, we're going to talk about the chapter web pages. So we're going to talk about how to update your chapter website and make it your own. And then finally, next Thursday, we're going to talk about the online renewal process in BNI Connect for those regions that are using that. A couple of housekeeping things before we get started with today's content. If you're here with us today, December 6th, 2016, you are on a live webinar. So that means you have the extreme pleasure and opportunity of asking questions as we're going through the material today. So feel free to ask anything that you'd like to. I love all comments, questions, suggestions, criticisms, compliments. Bring it on. I'd love to see those. The best way to do that is to please type those into the questions panel. I'll see that pop up on the screen and I can read it off and answer that question as we're going through the session today. For those of you that are listening to this on recording, you can always email your questions to support@bniconnect.com. And by the way, this and all of our webinars are recorded. We do make those available in a couple of different places. The first place is on the support site. So if you click that question mark in BNI Connect, you'll find the BNI Connect support site. You'll see a section for live and recorded webinars where you'll find our upcoming webinars, all the live schedules, as well as a couple of years worth of recordings at this point. You can also find those on our YouTube channel, youtube.com/BNI Connect Global. All right, so let's get started with today's session. Again, we're going to be talking about leadership team tools and reports. So what we're going to do is we are going to go to some of those scary places beyond the home screen here in BNI Connect and kind of dive in and see what's available to you guys. Before I do that, though, there are just a couple of very quick things on the home page that I want to point out, especially for people that might be keeping track of all the statistics in BNI Connect. And by the way, one other quick caveat about today's particular session. I'm going to be talking about a lot of, again, the things that most leadership teams do in BNI Connect. However, BNI is a big system. There are 7,500 chapters, 210,000 members around the world. Each region does things slightly differently, and things that you might do in your chapter, if you're a member of a chapter that, let's say, has 50 or 60 members in it, may be slightly different than the way that they do things in a 20-member chapter. Quick example of that is in most regions around the world, and in most chapters, it's the vice president that enters the POMS report statistics each week. However, in some regions, they've delegated that to either the secretary-treasurer or to special statistics keeping people that might be on the membership committee. So with that said, they take what I'm saying, try not to say, okay, it's the vice president's responsibility to do this. Rather, this is, if it is your responsibility, this is how to do that. All right, so Mary has a quick question. Mary says, all I'm seeing is an intro slide. Are there different slides, or should I open BNI Connect via a separate window? You're welcome to follow along in BNI Connect if you'd like to. What you're seeing now is actually just the login page to BNI Connect. I'm going to be kind of poking around through the system over the course of the next 45 minutes or so. So you're welcome to follow along with me in BNI Connect, or you can just watch as I'm clicking through on things on the screen. Does that help, Mary Jo? All right, so on the home screen here, there's a couple of really important things, especially if you are, the person in charge of keeping the POMS report for your chapter. As you are entering slips, so you're using the submit slips in BNI Connect here, note that those will be put into a draft of the POMS report for this week's upcoming meeting. So for example, I'm a member. We meet on Thursday mornings. So if I was to input, for example, a one-to-one slip for a one-to-one that I had yesterday. So I had a one-to-one with Greg Rosso yesterday. And I put that in for yesterday. This is going to be put into a draft for my upcoming meeting this week. Now, these numbers up here at the top of the screen, so for example, one-to-ones, I've had 59 one-to-ones in the last 12 months. You'll notice that when I submit this, that number does not change yet. And that's something that, especially members, they're expecting to see this to go from 59 to 60. It does not right away, not until after our meeting has happened this week and after the person has submitted the POMS reports, will that number change. It will be in my one-to-one slips report here. We'll see that one at the bottom here for Gregory Rosso. I can see that this is here and it is in draft mode. And again, these statistics will not be updated until after this week's meeting. The other thing that's important on the home page there is that if you have a member that approaches you and says, hey, by the way, these statistics they're just not right. I had more than 59 one-to-ones last year, or I had more than one visitor, or whatever that, let's say that the number of one-to-ones is actually 45,000. Maybe it got put in the wrong week in for thank you for closed business instead of in the one-to-one column. The easiest way to find those types of mistakes is to have the member click on the My Personal Participation Report link here and to take a look week by week to see where the error is. Usually it's pretty obvious that here in like the CEU column is 4,000 instead of it being in the Thank You for Closed Business column, and then we can go and correct that later. All right, so that's the home screen. I don't want to spend too much time on this because, as I said, we are going to be taking a deeper dive into the other places beyond the home screen here. So to do that, what we're going to have to do is go up to these menu items up along the top. Now, you'll notice that there's a couple of different places in BNI Connect. There's Network, Operations, Reports, Tools, and Admin. Now, depending on your level of access in BNI Connect, you may or may not have access to all of those things. We're going to concentrate today on Network, Operations, and Reports because that's where most people spend 90% of their time. Now, Network is going to be all the social media functions of BNI Connect, kind of the the groups and the connections, the testimonials. Well, I do a webinar separately on that. I'll be doing a webinar on the connecting with other members, which is that social media functionality, on December 21st if you want to join me for those. The other two places, Operations and Reports, that's really the most common places to go. Now, Operations is where you're going to go whenever you want to do stuff. Like you're going to be managing your chapter. You're going to be entering POMS reports. You need to get an email out to your chapter. You need to send a visitor invitation. You need to register a visitor. That's the place that we're going to go, is Operations. Operations is for really data input. Reports, on the other hand, are read only. So you'll only ever be able to get information back out of reports. You're never going to be able to put information in through reports. So let's take a look at that Operations menu and see some of the things that are available here under Operations. Now you'll see here on the left-hand side we have all the different functions, and on the right-hand side we kind of have sub-menus of each of those functions. So you can see here we have Managing Visitors, which allows us to record visitors and manage visitors and record prospective visitors. We have Meeting Management, which is where we enter our POMS reports and we enter our speaker rotation. Now, Manage Memberships, Some people have access to this and some people don't. It really depends on your region. I'm not going to go deep into this today, but this is where you'd go if you are responsible for entering applications in your chapter. This is where you would go to enter a new membership application. Now the goals functionality, we're going to talk about this in depth tomorrow in a 30-minute webinar, so you're welcome to join me to talk about the goals. But suffice to say that BNI Connect has a pretty cool tool that allows you to enter your chapter goals and then follow along with them throughout the year to see how well you're doing. You can assign mentors and mentees in BNI Connect, which will send them a weekly email to let them know where they should be in the mentoring process. And finally, the create email. Now, the manage news function is a special function that has to do with your chapter website. I'll talk about that a little bit more in the chapter webmaster webinar next week. While we're here, let's take a look at this create email because there's a couple of cool little tools in here. Now, one thing that you may need to do as somebody that's on the leadership team, and you might need to do this frequently, is to remind your chapter about something. Maybe you're going to be doing a special, weekly presentation this week where you're doing other people's, commercials, or maybe it's that, you're having a, after hours event or a Christmas party or, something like that that you need to remind all the members of your chapter about. The easiest way to do that is to come here to create email and click on email my chapter. Now, keep in mind, there is this messaging function up here at the top. That is an internal messaging function. So I know a lot of people use that function to try to drop messages in there and they're like, hey, how come nobody knew about this in the chapter? Those messages stay internal to BNI Connect. And that's an important point to make, is that, if you need to get an email to everybody's actual inbox, you need to use this email my chapter function. Now, I've been a member for a long time, and I can tell you I used to have to hit reply all to the last message that went and hope it went to the right people. So now I can just come here, I can highlight and paste, copy all of these, use my own email program, and I would just put everybody into the BCC line here. And this allows me to use my own formatting, my own function, my own email program in order to get that message out. I click send and they will get that message, and the replies will come back to my own email box. All right, so that's the email my chapter. Also under this create email, the second function here is email visitor invitation. So it's really a quick way to get an invitation out. I talk about this a lot more in our visitor webinar, but very quickly, this is a way to, if any of your members are struggling with inviting a visitor to a chapter, to have the right words to say, and also to make sure that they actually come to the meeting. This is a great way to do that. So for example, let's say that I meet somebody at a networking event, like to invite them to my chapter. I can come in and let's say, hey, it was John Smith from Smith Co. John at smithco.com, and the personal message. Personal message is going to appear at the top of it. So, it was great meeting you. Please remember to RSVP using the link below. Right, and if I click send, now the cool thing is it will automatically carbon copy me on that message. So it'll send it right away and send it out to my prospective visitor, and then also send me a copy. So in a second, in my inbox, I will receive a copy of that particular invitation, so I can be sure that it went out and also what it looks like. So here it is here. Here's the invitation. You can see BNI, how will you grow your business? Hi, John, how are you planning to grow your business, etc. It briefly describes what BNI is all about. There's even a website that's been dedicated just to explaining what BNI is all about, and some testimonials and things like that. And then also we have the ability for that visitor to RSVP now, has all of the chapter information in there for you. So the person can RSVP for an upcoming meeting. Let's say for the meeting tomorrow, John Smith from Smithco. The email address, I'm going to put my own email address in here so that you can see what happens next. Invited by, let's say, Jeremy, and then the CAPTCHA code to make sure I'm not a robot. And now this visitor is registered for the upcoming meeting. I'll tell you this right here is what gets more potential visitors to show up is now they've committed to that meeting. So once you've invited them and they RSVP, now what's going to happen is they will get an email saying you are now confirmed to visit this meeting. What also happens is that all you guys on the leadership team, president, vice president, secretary, treasurer, visitor hosts, you all get an email saying, hey, guess what? You have a visitor this week. That means that now you can be prepared to welcome that visitor to the meeting. And by the way, here's the email. You are officially confirmed to visit the BNI Burr chapter. Lets them know where to go and to please bring business cards and what to expect. So great tool for increasing the visitors. And again, as a leadership team, you'll now be ready for them. Lauren has a question. Lauren says, do all members have access to the operations page? Or do the visitor emails you're showing need to come from the leadership? That's a great tool. No, all members should have access to get to this page. Now, when they get here, they may not see all of these functions. So the functions here are based on what your access level is in BNI Connect. So you may not see everything that's there, just what you have access to. So does that help, Lauren? But everybody in the system should have access to create email visitor invitation. Let's see, David says, I'd like to batch the RSVP link to a list serve of clients. Is there an easy way to send the RSVP link outside of BNI Connect? Can we cut and paste the RSVP link into a separate email, or is there a better way? First of all, yes, this RSVP link, you just send one of these to yourself, and you can right-click and copy that hyperlink, and you can use that hyperlink here for what you need it for. However, here's let me turn that question on its head. The invitation tool and the RSVP, BNI is not a cold call organization. We are a word of mouth, face-to-face networking organization. The invitation and this registration piece is really meant to be the second invitation. It's not meant to be let's take this and spam it out to 1,000 of our closest friends, or invite 10,000 people to a Facebook event or anything like that. It's really meant to be a little bit more personal. Somebody should be expecting this invitation and then can use it from there. All right, does that help, David? All right, so David said perfect. It's a second invitation. That's exactly it. It's the second invitation. Awesome. All right, so the other thing that happens is once that person has registered, as a leadership team, you now can look at manage visitors. And here's where we can work with our visitor database. So once you start registering visitors and visitors start showing up to your chapter, now you're creating a visitor database for your chapter. So you can always go back and look at this later and use it for other purposes. So for example, under Manage Visitors, RSVPing through the link is essentially the same as registering a prospective visitor before a meeting. This is essentially the exact same form. It's just on the logged in portion of BNI Connect, where BNI members could register their visitors without having to go to the regional website. But then once you've registered them, they now go into a registered visitors database. So I can take a look in here, for example, and I can see all the people that have been registered to visit our meeting. So right here, there's John Smith, who I just registered a few minutes ago to visit tomorrow's meeting. Yeah, I can see I've used John Smith quite a few times here, but let's say that John Smith did come to the meeting or does come to the meeting. Now the cool part about it is that if you're a visitor host or you're a secretary treasurer who's responsible for entering all the visitors after a meeting, especially after a visitor's day, you know what a pain in the neck it is to get that sign-in sheet, go back to your office and have to spend an hour or longer typing in all the information of all the visitors. If you can get the visitors to register themselves, once the visitor comes to the meeting, all you have to do is click on Edit and click the button that says, yes, this visitor attended. Once the visitor has attended, you'll get an option. Do you want to add this visitor to the Palms? In other words, do you want to give the person that invited them credit in the Palms, in the V column, for inviting that visitor? Now, there's certain situations where you may want to say no. The reason being that this will affect your traffic lights. So if you're using the chapter traffic lights to monitor your progress, you'll know that one of the things that you're rated on is visitor conversion. So how many visitors are coming through the chapter and how many of them are converted into new members? If you're recording the same visitor for credit over and over and over again, then you're lowering your conversion ratio. So really the person should only be added to the Palms the first time they visit, and they really should be an eligible visitor, meaning that they could theoretically input an application. You can then verify their profession and specialty. You can put in you do need to verify who invited them. So it'll show you what was entered on the website, but you do have to put the right person in the drop-down. You can fill out any missing information, and finally you can choose whether or not to send that visitor a follow-up email. Most of the time you are going to want to send them that follow-up email, but there might be times when you don't. Let's say that you're kind of really far behind on visitor entry. Not that that would happen to anybody here, but it might be embarrassing to send a, hey, thanks for visiting recently, when you had put that in like a month ago or something like that. All right, and once we've entered them, that visitor will get a thank you for visiting email. And you will notice that that particular John Smith from 12/7 is no longer in the prospective visitors list. They're going to be in our already visited the chapter list. Note that you can also add a visitor here if the person did not pre-register. You can click on Add Visitor and enter them in from scratch right from this page. If I go back to the Operations menu, what we'll see here is if we now go to Manage our Visitors database after a meeting, I can look through our attended visitors, and I should see John Smith in here, and I can see that he attended in the future tomorrow on 12/7. All right, so that's the visitor management piece right there. Any quick questions on the visitor process? Again, I go into depth on the visitor process as part of one of our members webinars. I'm going to be doing that a little bit later in the month on December 29th, talking about the entire visitors process. So if you like that process, what I recommend is maybe getting your chapter together and taking a look at the invitation and everything a little bit more in depth on December 29th with me. All right, so let's take a look at this next thing down. It says meeting management, a couple of things that we do here. First of which is the Palms management. This is kind of the bread and butter of BNI as far as the back-end management goes. It's really, we pride ourselves on keeping these statistics for our chapter year after year after year. We have, in some cases, 20 years or more worth of Palms data for certain chapters. But it does need to be entered on a weekly basis. So we do that. And usually it's the vice president. Sometimes it's been delegated to other people in the chapter. But we just go to meeting management and on a weekly basis go to enter Palms. All right, the first thing that you'll see when you go to enter the Palms report is a list of visitors that have been proposed for credit in the Palms report. you need to make a decision on all of these visitors. So for example, I can see John Smith came to visit on 11/16 and 12/7. Do I want to give Jeremy credit for that visitor? I can choose yes or I can choose no. If I choose yes, it will go to that POMS report and put a 1 in my column for that week. Now you see this one, this Visi visitor here was back entered all the way back to October, and the POMS has already been completed for that week. So that means that I could, if I want to, click this completed link. It will allow me to review that POMS to see if a visitor was manually entered. I can check, and no visitor was manually entered. So I can choose if I want to. Yes, I do want to add that person to the POMS. It'll go back, it'll unlock and resubmit that POMS for me with that credit. And of course, I can see this John Smith, this was a duplicate visit, so I really don't want to give credit again for this one, so I can just choose no. The visitor will stay in the visitor database, so we're not going to lose the record. We're just not giving credit in the POMS report. All right, now it's going to ask me, when do I want to enter the POMS for? So I'm going to enter this for last week's meeting, November 30th. Click on Enter POMS. And essentially entering the POMS is filling out a spreadsheet. It's about as simple as that. So you go to your meeting, you come back, you have your pile of referral slips and one-to-one slips and CEU slips and thank you for closed business. You just need to basically go through that pile and enter them in. So if you had a, let me just explain these columns real quick for anybody that doesn't know what all these columns are. POMS is the attendance record. So essentially it's present, absent, late, medical, or substitute. Present, absent, late, medical, substitute. So you need to go through for each member, and let's say that Alfred E. Newman was absent this week, and Ricky Martin, he was late, and Sally Smith had a substitute. So we can put in any of those. The M record, which is medical, that is something that does need to be approved by your membership committee. So it's not really intended to be, oh, this person had a cold this week or something like that. It's usually reserved for somebody's going to be out for an extended period of time, 3 or 4 weeks, but maximum of 6 weeks, that they need to preserve their membership while they're away. All right, RGI and RGO, RRI and RRO. R stands for referrals. G stands for given. The I and the O are inside and outside. So RGI is a referral given inside. That means that, let's say that I'm doing business with another member of my chapter. So again, I'm doing business. An inside referral is 2 chapter members doing business with each other. For example, in my chapter, the accountant that's in our chapter is also my accountant. So when I first started doing business with her, that was an inside referral. My business was utilizing the services of another member in my chapter. There's always 2 sides to that. So let's say that David Furman here had an inside referral. He is going to be using the services of Jamie Jones. So David Furman referred himself to Jamie Jones. That's an R referral given inside and a referral received inside. Now an RGO, and that's an outside referral. An outside referral means that I'm referring, well, somebody from outside the chapter to another member. So let's say that my mother needed to get her house cleaned. That would be considered an outside referral. So let's say I'm referring my mother to Adam Sandler, who is in the house cleaning business now. So that would be a given outside referral for me and a received outside referral for Adam. So visitors, those would get automatically populated if you're entering your visitors. Otherwise, you can enter them manually. One-to-ones are meetings between 2 members, and both people do get credit for that. So if Johnny Depp met with Alfred Newman this week, they would get credit for one-to-one. And then finally, well, we have thank you for closed business. Again, that's the people that have generated business. So let's say that Mike Jones was thanked for generating $1,200 worth of business. And the final number, you do have to scroll over horizontally here at the bottom, but we do have CEUs, and CEUs are the chapter education units. For example, today would be worth 1 CEU. So we have a question from Lauren. Lauren says, if members are using, using the online slips to enter things, then how do we make sure that we're not doubling up? So the way that you do that is there will be a slips audit report. So this is Antarctica. So Antarctica, we don't have a whole lot of people that are entering POMS reports, but in a second, let me show you my chapter and what it looks like when everybody's using the the online slips, whether that's through the app or whether it's just by logging into BNI Connect and submitting slips. Before I do that though, real quick, once we're done filling out the spreadsheet, there's a couple of options at the bottom. 99% of the time, 51 out of 52 weeks, you're probably going to choose Submit POMS. And what that will do is just allow you to submit the POMS report. So you're going to submit that. It will become part of the official statistics. This should be done as soon as possible after your meeting has ended. There's a couple of other options. Mark as holiday. What that means is that your chapter did not meet that week. For example, our chapter, we did not meet on Thanksgiving. So we needed to make sure that we go in and we submit last week's report as a holiday. What that will do, especially if you're using online slips, it will take that out of that report out of the statistics, but also take all online slips and push them to next week's meeting. So that way they'll still be counted. Please don't do that before the meeting would have ended. You want to make sure that you do that after the meeting would have ended, but before the next meeting. Save as draft means that, hey, you know what, I'm in the middle of doing my POMS reports and I just got an important phone call. I want to make sure I can come back and finish it later. Choose save as draft. If you completely messed everything up and you want to start over again, click discard POMS. I'm going to go ahead and submit this one. I'll get a quick review, allowing me to take a look at the submitted POMS, and if I made an error on it, I could unlock it, and I could also view the slips audit report to see what electronic activity was done that week. So let me, very quickly though, let me switch over to the United States here and go to my region, which is Rhode Island, and my chapter, which is Wakefield. And let's take a look and we'll see if I go to enter a POMS report for my chapter, and let's say for, even though this week hasn't happened yet, let me look if I was to enter it for this week. So what you'll see is that there's a whole lot of activity that has already been entered. So to answer your question, Lauren, most of the time it's pretty obvious. There's not a lot of people that are using, the online version and using paper slips. But most of the time you can tell, especially with referrals given, to say, oh, yeah, Kim Kelly had a paper referral and an online referral. Yeah, not really sure about that because, you'll see both sides of that transaction. You can also, though, however, use this slips audit report. And what this will do is show you the details of all of those slips that were passed. It's just going to take a second. So here we go. You can see that, Brad Asher had a one-to-one with Colin. Dave had a one-to-one with Jane. Jeremy had a outside referral for Mark. You can see this one's actually bolded because that one is in another chapter. So it even allows for those cross-chapter. You can see the thank you for closed business as well down here. All right, so that's how you can kind of monitor that if you're using a combination of both online slips and paper slips. All right, Michael says, well, what about thank you for closed business from a former member? So if I had thank you for closed business from a former member, that would go in this BNI line down at the bottom. So you can see even here, we have thanked past members in my chapter for about $80,000 worth of business so far this week. Okay, that's really all we're reporting for past members. We're not really recording referrals any longer. Referrals are meant to only be recorded between active members of the chapter, not past members of the chapter. All right, so does that answer your question, Michael? Let's see, Tom says, will online reporting be expected in the future? Will we still use paper slips? I do go into that in a bit more detail in the online slips webinar, but really quickly, more and more chapters are moving towards the online slips for a lot of reasons. One major reason is that it is way more convenient, both for the member and for the vice president, because it used to take our vice president an hour to an hour and a half to enter the POMS reports. Now it takes my vice president about a minute a week, because all my VP has to do now is take attendance as opposed to count up all of those paper slips. Now that said, are the paper slips going away? Not necessarily. You can still use the paper slips to have that visual effect at the meetings. They just, they're not needed for counting anymore at that point. So you can still use them for the door prize and things like that. Does that make sense, Tom? I don't know anybody that's hardcore, requiring the online, but it is recommended. Let's see, Antoinette says, sometimes the referrals given and referrals received don't balance, as can be seen in my own chapter right here. Referrals given, referrals received, referrals given 9, referrals received 7. That's okay. And the reason why they're not going to balance, especially nowadays with cross-chapter referrals, is that the referral given would be in one chapter and the referral received would be in another chapter. So yes, it is okay if they don't balance up. So does that make sense, Antoinette? All right, and again, you can check that here. What I should see is if I go to Slips Audit Report, I should see 2 cross-chapter referrals in this Slips Audit Report. And here under referral slips, I can see that we have a couple of, well, we actually have a couple of referrals here, Mark, Michael, and Michael. So there's actually 3, which actually makes sense for the referrals. All right. Cool. All right, I'm not going to submit my chapter's POMS reports. All right, the next thing that you can do under meeting management is to view and edit the speakers. You can view your speakers here and who's spoken. If your chapter has been using this, you can actually go back and review speakers going back as long as you've been entering them every week. I do recommend using this for your speaker rotation. It does send a reminder to both the Secretary Treasurer and the upcoming speaker that they're the speaker for the week. That way they you have fewer chances that somebody's going to forget that they are that week's speaker. So we can see in my chapter, for example, going through December, this week we have Ron Hubblebank and Frank. Next week we have Scott and Stephen, then we have Christy and Elliot, and so on and so forth. If you need to change somebody, unfortunately you can't shift people up and down, but you can delete somebody and add somebody in. If you want to add somebody new, just click on Assign Speaker. You can enter the date that they'll be speaking, who's speaking, and what their topic is. Now again, I'm not going to do this for my live chapter, but that's when they would also get the email reminder both 6 days before they're speaking and 3 days before they're speaking. All right, the last thing really I want to show you guys under the operations, the day-to-day management function. Again, I'm going to go over the goals program in tomorrow's webinar if you'd like to join me. But then there's mentors. So you can just, it's almost as similar as assigning speakers. You can also assign mentors and mentees. You just choose the date that they're going to start getting their emails. Let's say that you want the emails to come on Fridays. Choose who the mentor is and who the mentee is, and click Submit. And then they will start getting their weekly mentoring emails. So that's the operations menu and a lot of the data input that we do on a week-to-week basis. Does anybody have any questions on any of the stuff here under operations before we move on to some of the reports? You know, we have about 14 minutes or so left. I want to make sure that we cover enough of the reports as well. Lauren says, do I have a copy or a sample of the mentor emails? I can get those over to you possibly, but what I would say, Lauren, is the easiest thing to do and to kind of experience it, why don't you and one other leadership team person in your chapter just pair each other up as mentor and mentee, and then you could see how that functions work and you'd get the emails for the next couple of weeks. And the reason I say that too is because different regions may have their own versions of the emails. So I can send you what the HQ version is, but it may be different with what you have in your area. All right, cool. So let's move on to some of the reports. So let's go to reports and take a look at what we have there. Now, once we get into the reports, you'll notice that there are quite a few reports. I don't have time today to go through all of them. Believe it or not, I actually have another webinar at the top of the hour for some director consultants that are just starting out in BNI, so I'm going to show them some things. However, I'd like to show you about 5 or 6 of my favorite reports from a leadership team perspective, if that's okay. It's kind of going to look like I'm showing you all of them because it happens to be the first 5 or 6 reports on the list, but that's that. So firstly, the member training report, the very first one on the list here. That one is an important report. One of the reasons why it's important, especially for you people that are scheduling the speaker rotation. Most notably, the secretary treasurers. One of the requirements for being able to do a 10-minute presentation at your chapter is that you've been through the member success program. Well, what's an easy way to check to see if somebody has taken it? Go to the member training report. You can look for member success program and see who has taken it. However, more importantly, there's an option here that says show never attended. So you can kind of do this in the reverse to say, all right, I'm doing the speaker rotation and make sure that these people aren't on the list. All right, let's see. Renee says, what can I do when my report doesn't show a matching event on BNI when members meet outside our group? I'm not sure what you mean by that, Renee. I'm sorry. So this particular report will just be for BNI events and not for, if you have a networking event or something like that with the chamber. These are just going to be training events within BNI. I don't know if that's what you were asking or not. Sorry, Renee. All right, the next report here is the chapter roster report. Again, fairly straightforward, but there's a couple of little twists on this one that I'd like to mention. First of which is if you have, let's say you're the president and your visitor host comes up to you and says, hey, I haven't been able to enter the visitors. First thing to do, come to this report and check, are they listed as a visitor host? If they are not listed as a visitor host here, then they don't have the permissions. They just have not been assigned that position in BNI. So if that's the case, get in touch with your director consultant or with your executive director. They can certainly help you out with that by making sure that the person is assigned into their position. If you scroll down, it'll show you your number of members and all the members and the contact information. Again, all stuff that you'd expect to see in a roster. The other thing that I use this for, and I'm on the membership committee of my chapter this time around, so we look at this report on a weekly basis, and what we look for, this is the 90-day activity report. We kind of look for people, especially that haven't had any one-to-ones or very few one-to-ones and very few referrals in the past 90 days. Because that helps us to say, oh, well, you know what? Linda here has only had one-to-one in the last 90 days. She might need some help. She might need somebody to work with her, or, you know, maybe I just need to reach out to her and have a one-to-one with her myself and get her re-engaged in the chapter. So that's what we use this report for regularly, to really keep an eye on members and to make sure that they're staying engaged, especially, you know, in the last 90 days. The membership dues report, this is for all of you, especially vice presidents out there and membership committee people. This will let you know when people are up for renewal. It's very similar to the roster report, except it has their due dates. Obviously, the top 3 positions, they have their compensated dues. So whatever time they had in BNI when they took over the position, they'll have that same amount of time when they get out. And then, of course, the people that are in bold here, those are the people that are due within the next 2 months, which means that they should already be in the renewal process. If you're using paper renewals, make sure that they've already gotten their renewal forms. These are the ones that you should be announcing at the weekly meeting as well. Now, I also, again, being on the membership committee, we like to look at this not just for the next 2 months out, but really 6 months out. So we're looking at the people that are due in May and June. So that's these people on my list. The reason for that is that, you know, when we're making a decision on somebody that's due this month or next month, that's kind of just a yes, we accept the person, or no, we don't. However, people that are about 6 months out, we can do some proactive coaching. So we can still help people that might need some assistance so that they do renew, because we want people to stay in BNI. We want people to develop those long-term relationships with other members of the chapter. Now, the meeting notes report, this is a way to be able to have your members take notes during the meeting. So a lot of people have done this manually for years. You can do it manually, or you can use this. Now, here's a great thing about this report, and really all reports in BNI Connect. You'll notice that there's a couple of buttons at the top of each one of these reports. It says export without headers, export, and print. So you can obviously print these reports, and it'll print it out using your printer. Then you have export and export without headers. Here's the difference. Export is going to bring this out to Microsoft Excel, but when it does that, you'll see that it has all of this stuff up here at the top. So who ran the report and when it was run, and that's great. If I'm going to save this and I want to have a time and date stamp, that's very helpful. But if I wanted to, let's say, sort this by first name instead of last name, or if I want to resize these fields, it's kind of a pain in the neck because it has all these merged columns at the top. That's why we have export without headers. And what this is going to do instead is to not have all that extra information at top. So that means I can now use my favorite button here, format as table, give it a color scheme. And now I can sort it by first name instead of last name. I can, let's say I want much more space to take notes. I can do that. I want to make my notes field a lot bigger. And let's say, here we go. So, I mean, now I have full control over this, and I can do whatever I want with the with this report in order to utilize it. All right, the summary POMs, straightforward. It's our POMs report in a summary fashion. Now, it's by default, it's going to show us a 6-month rolling period. So it's showing us the previous 6 months in BNI. You can change this date range to anything you want. So if I want to see a year-to-date report, I can change this to be a year-to-date report. The other option is whether or not you want to show the dropped members, especially if you're running this report for, let's say, 2 years or 5 years or 10 years. You may or may not want to see all of the people that have been in the chapter. Now, if I choose to exclude dropped members, keep in mind that this total at the bottom, if I was to add all of these columns up, they're not going to match the total because it's still going to include everybody's contribution. It's just hiding the dropped member names from the list. All right, for you vice presidents, the absence report. This is going to show you the last 6 months. So after your meeting, what you want to do is make a note of who's been absent, then come to this, and if they were absent today, look here to see how many absences it's been and whether or not you need to send them a control letter. When it's up for review, the Personal Palms report is a great report to be able to just run the statistics for a single member for any period of time. You'll note that this is the same report that's on a home page, except anybody can run these reports for any other member of the chapter. It'll also show how many members they've sponsored and what training events they've been to. All right, and there's some other reports down here as well. I highly recommend that you take some time to go through and click through them. Just take a look at the reports, see what they do. For example, this member details report. As a secretary-treasurer, if you're going to be introducing the upcoming speaker, you can click on View Member Bio for anybody in your chapter and have a nice printable version of their bio, or you can always copy and paste it if you want to. Those visitor registration reports to see how many visitors are registered for an upcoming meeting and who invited them, especially helpful on visitors' days. All right, we have about 2 minutes left or so. I just want to make sure I show you one more quick thing, actually 2 more quick things. If I go back to the home page here, you'll notice here on the left-hand side is this ribbon that says My BNI Business. Below that, you'll also see My Network. This has all the networking components, but importantly, it also has a list view of all the events in your region, as well as a document sharing. So this will be documents that may be important to you as a leadership team in your region. Keep in mind that these are shared by your regional office, so they're things that your executive director or director consultants feel that are important for your region. We can't upload anything there as members of the chapter. It's more for finding things that your office has shared. Below that, though, you'll see a cool thing. It says Chapter Shortcuts. Now, what this is your personal list of things that you're going to use most frequently. And you can configure this and customize it any way you want to. So, for example, instead of going to Operations, Chapter, Create Email, Email My Chapter, I could just go to Chapter Shortcuts, Email My Chapter, and be able to email my chapter right from here. So that saves me about a half a dozen clicks and a couple of screen refreshes along the way. You can configure this by clicking the Configure button. Anything on the left-hand side is in your personal list. I can take things out of my list by clicking the X button. Now I have nothing in my list. And then over here on the right-hand side, I can go through and click things and put them into my list. Right, so let's say that one of my favorite things is the ability to, I want to email my chapter, let's say, so I'm going to go email, here we go, email my chapter and email visitor invitation. I want those at the top of my list, so I'm going to drag and drop that up to the top of my list, as well as the visitor invitation. Click Submit to save that. When I go back out to my chapter shortcuts, you'll notice that this list has now been refreshed, and I have these things right at my fingertips. So I can go right from my business to chapter shortcuts to email a visitor invitation right away, instead of going to, again, operations, chapter, or any of the reports are there as well. All right, so we are just about at the top of the hour. I usually love to stay and entertain tons and tons of questions. As I said, though, today I do have another webinar that I have to conduct for some director consultants that are joining us in BNI at the top of the hour. I can take one or two questions. Renee has a clarification, says my number has a one-to-one but not a matching event on BNI. So what I would say is just check to see if they've submitted that slip. Unfortunately, we can't see the details of what they're doing, but what you can do is ask them to send you a copy of their review my one-to-one slips. Or if you'd like to, what I would say is you can submit a ticket with us here in BNI Connect support, and we can take a closer look at that one. That sounds like it might be an anomaly in what that person has entered. All right, do we have any other questions? All right. In the meantime, I just want to say thank you, everybody, for being here. Again, this is part of a series of webinars that we're going to be doing all month. Our next webinar is going to be tomorrow, Wednesday, December 7th. We're going to be talking about chapter goals for leadership teams. I invite you to join us, and if you think that this was a good use of your time and you learned some new things, please share these webinars, both the recordings and the links to register, with other people in your chapter and or other people in your region. Thank you so much, everyone, and have an absolutely wonderful rest of your week, and happy connecting.